Aaron, hey, congratulations on your new series, Revival on Syfy.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's great to speak with you. And yeah, that's crazy to hear somebody say that out loud. So yeah, appreciate that.
I watched a few episodes and it's so addicting. I just don't know. I just feel like I need the next episode immediately after watching the one after the next. But could you tell us what, how did the series actually came about with you?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of that credit goes to my co-creator, Luke Boyce, who we made a small film together and just forged a really wonderful working relationship and just became good friends. And he's like, look, I have this dream project. I got the rights to this comic. It's a big deal. It was a New York Times bestseller. But I can't get it off the ground. We're trying to get a feature going. We've been struggling with different things. And he's like, can you, my main, my day job, if you will, is I'm a producer, produced about 25 or so features, was a writer director myself as well too. But that was where he knew I could get stuff made. And I was like, oh, I've heard of this writer, Tim Seeley. I've heard of Hack Slash. I've read some of Hack Slash. I'd heard of Revival. I never read it. I was like, yeah, let me check it out. Let me see. And I just read the first issue of the comic and I was like aghast. I was like, oh my God. I called him up. I was like, dude, this is a pilot. This is a series. Like I see this world. There are so many interesting characters, and that's what TV is. TV is character driven, and you're so focused on like you're not watching Friends or Seinfeld because of what hijinks they get into. You're watching it to see those characters interact with each other, right? And what's there. Last of Us doesn't work necessarily because of the horror. It works because of Joel and Ellie, and Abby and where that goes. So those characters are everything. And Tim Seeley, the creator of the comic, had created such a wonderful tapestry of interesting, weird characters in Wausau, Wisconsin, that I was like, this feels like Fargo, but it's a murder mystery. And then, wait a second, not only that, it's a murder mystery where the person who's murdered is still alive to solve their own murder. Like that's so cool. I've never seen that before. And let's pare this down and focus on that. And yeah, and I went out, pitched it as a murder mystery show, with supernatural elements, and was very, very thankful to get it greenlit and be here.
Now, adaptations are hard to do, especially the fact that you're adapting it from a comic book series, and we know that with like video game series or comic book series into a TV series. What are some of the changes or challenges with Revival in this case?
Yeah, I mean, this was a comic where, and Tim and Mike, the creators of the comic, will be the first to tell you that when you make a comic, you never really, I mean, when you make anything, you never really know how it's going to go. But in comics in particular, when it goes well, you have to pump out new issues very fast. So they knew where this was going to end. They knew where it began and had some ideas, but they had to make a lot of content in between. So this sprawls for 47 issues. And it goes wild directions. Like there's some crazy stuff that happens in the comics. And even I'm like reading Resin finally reading through the comics, I was like, oh my God, like, whoa, I never expected this stuff to happen. And even though it's really cool, I was like, I don't know that this is the first season of a television show. Maybe in the future, we could start to kind of move off and have side missions, if you will, and kind of go in these directions. There were so many characters. I was like, let's pare this down to be about the Cypress family, to be about, like I said, that hook to me, which was the murder mystery where they're still alive and what that could mean. And then come to who was the murderer and what caused revival day as our two central questions, and just keep those as the hook. And I think you could really find something really fun to mine. And that kind of became, it allowed us to really stay focused on where those relationships were, and the Cypress family, if you will, and Dana and Wayne, and then little things like a will they won't they with Dana and Ibrahim, and what could happen with M and Rhodey. It's same thing there, and these things that could be fun to kind of play with. But it gave us a pathway, a walkway that's like, okay, this is where we stay focused, and then now we can consolidate a lot of the comics down while still allowing us so much runway to tap into like a season two and season three and beyond, which would be really fun. So it's kind of an untraditional way of taking it because we're consolidating it, but then we'll dig back in and pull those things out, if we're so fortunate to have future seasons.
Now, for those people who haven't seen it yet, obviously, we're talking this before the premiere. How do you describe a reviver? Because a lot of people would see the trailers and go, "What are they? Zombies or resurrected?" I mean, how would you actually describe it? Or is that the entire mystery of the thing?
Well, that's part of it. I think part of it is you start to ask the question of, what is this person who is clearly different than you but not different than you, and what does that make you feel, and why do people feel unsafe because they're different? And I think especially in the world today there's a lot of crazy stuff going on around that, and I found some I thought were some really interesting parallels to kind of, without getting preachy, to talk about what that means to be someone who's, feels unwanted in their own hometown. And I think that's happening right now, especially in America. And so we play with that. So I thought that was an interesting kind of angle to take. But as far as the zombie side of it all, they're just people. They just happen to have come back from the dead. They look and appear just like everyone else, and now they heal, and they appear to not be able to be killed. And so what does that mean? And that's scary to someone. Wayne says flat out, I think in first couple episodes, how do I police something that can't be killed? And I think that inherently is like a flawed logic, right? Of like, well, now you're already talking about like that's the extreme that you have to go in order to control something. And if that's the control here, then you're looking at it the wrong way. And Wayne very much is that kind of like small-minded viewpoint, that kind of permeates through the season. So, but yeah, we just I also didn't want to tell a zombie story as part of it too, like zombie stories are really about death, and I wanted our show to be about life and second chances and like what that means. And Luke very much the same way, who's so passionate about the source material and felt the same way. And yeah, that was kind of our angle.
Now, for you, Aaron, personally, tell us about the transition because I'm familiar with a lot of your films. I watched like The Pale Door, something you produced like The Artifice Girl, and they're like thrilling and horror genre. And you're transitioning into a TV series. Can you talk about that transition and how did this affect you personally on that transition?
Yeah, I appreciate that question because it's such an interesting thing where, I've used this like other side of my brain for so long, which is that producing managerial pragmatic side, which you just have to problem solve and figure it out and work to a budget and manage people and all of that I've done and relatively successfully, and been able to kind of make a career out of that. But then I started off as a writer, and that's still my original passion. I became a director to protect my writing and became a producer to protect my directing. And so this became the perfect amalgamation of the two strengths I think that I have. And so where I was able to use the creative side of my brain and use the rational, pragmatic side, not that you can't be rational on the creative side, but you know what I mean, as far as what's there, and forge these two together. So but again, I was a first time showrunner. I've never run a writer's room. I had just EP'd a very, very tiny TV show. That's all that it was, where I just kind of helped a little bit and consulted. But here to create a show from the ground up, build this off the source studio, adapt, run a writer's room, run the production, work with directors in that fashion, TV directors, which is very different than on the feature side, was definitely a challenge, but feels so much in my wheelhouse. And don't get me wrong, it's the craziest thing I've ever done in my entire life, but it is also easily the most fulfilling. And now that I have a taste of this, I'm like, oh my God, I don't ever want to go back. I love making movies. I'm still going to make movies. That's going to happen. But this kind of scratched a creative itch in a way that I never knew was possible. And, I think I'm so thankful that I did this at a later time in my life where I was more mature. I had the management experience, I had the producing experience, because otherwise you get these writers and they're just thrown into these huge managerial roles and they're like, what am I doing? And but I was like, oh no, this is my zone. Like I know how to do this. This is just like another movie. And we just treated blocks of episodes like movies, and I produced multiple movies at the same time. So I was able to kind of juggle a lot of things and very organized and pragmatic in the way that I kind of, my life is so organized. And so that played very well into doing this actually, which is crazy. And I don't know how I lucked into that. And I'm so fortunate. But yeah, that's where I am. And I'm so grateful for it.
Well, Aaron, let me wrap it up with one last question because I know you're a fan of the horror genre because of a lot of your extensive films, but you also had to be creative because sometimes budgetary reason a lot of them have to be like independent and so on. But I always like to ask horror directors and producers like yourself because there's always that debate between practical and CGI, and in this case, you have a little bit more money and an extended series with a revival. But which side are you going to be on when it comes to practical and CGI effects?
I mean, that's a loaded question. You know the answer to this because you know that any real horror fan is going to give you the right answer, which is that it's practical effects through and through. I mean, I have like, Jason, like all this stuff tattooed, like because this is what I want to do. This is what it's all about. To me, the silicone and the rubber on set and all these things, like there is, as you get into future episodes, there may or may not be something coming that a lot of people told me should be a CGI thing. And I was like, it's not CGI, guys. It's not. We're going to build a puppet. We're going to do this whole thing. This is what we're going to do. And they're like, oh my goodness, like that's going to be crazy. And I'm like, we'll figure it out. And let's pare down this to allow us time to do this. I'm so glad that I did. So yeah, we are practical effects on the show. It's a big through line of everything that I do at Paper Street Pictures. Steve Kostanski, made Psycho Gorman and, such a wonderful director, Frankie Fico recently, which is great with all these puppets. He was our head of special makeup effects, and just him and I geeking out over like the coolest ways to do this kill or this move or these things was so fun, of so fun. So yeah, practical effects through and through, forever and always. It'll never change. And I want when Paper Street's behind it or my name's behind it, you know that that's coming with it, and it definitely comes even more so than episode one in some future episodes. Yeah.
You certainly love the horror genre. I can't wait for everyone to check out Revival. So thank you very much, Aaron. And hopefully we'll circle back again and to talk about some of the spoilers.
Yeah, can't wait. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Bye now.